No one was supposed to notice the child. Children like her were meant to stay invisible, especially inside Vos Castle, where power walked in silk and shadows swallowed servants whole. Elara Ashwin had learned that lesson early, not through words but through silence. Through the way nobles looked past her as if she were furniture. Through the way guards stiffened when she wandered too close. Through the way her mother always whispered, "Eyes down, Elara. Always eyes down." Elara tried. But curiosity was louder than fear. The night of the blood moon banquet, the castle felt different. The air pulsed, heavy and alive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Servants rushed through corridors carrying silver trays and crystal goblets filled with dark red wine that smelled metallic and sweet. Chandeliers were lit hours earlier than usual, flooding the upper halls with golden firelight. Elara's mother, Mara Ashwin, was exhausted. She had been on her feet since dawn, scrubbing floors that nobles dirted without thought, polishing armor she would never wear, preparing a celebration meant for immortals who barely acknowledged the hands that served them. Her fingers were raw. Her shoulders ached. Still, she forced a smile for her daughter. "Stay here," Mara said softly, kneeling to fix the hem of Elara's plain gray dress. "Do not wander tonight. Promise me." Elara nodded. She always nodded. But when Mara disappeared down the corridor, Elara felt it again, that strange pull in her chest. A gentle tug, like a thread winding around her heart and leading her somewhere important. The castle whispered. She followed. Bare feet padded silently across cold stone as Elara slipped through servant passages she knew by heart. She passed murals older than memory, depicting wars and crowns and kings with glowing red eyes. The closer she moved toward the heart of the castle, the stronger the feeling became. Until she reached the great doors. The scarlet crown chamber. They stood slightly open, light spilling out like liquid gold. Elara peeked inside, breath catching in her throat. She had never seen anything so beautiful, or so terrifying. The chamber was vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadow. Columns of black marble rose like ancient giants, veins of crimson glowing faintly beneath their surface. Nobles filled the room, dressed in velvet and bone, laughter low and sharp. Guards lined the walls, unmoving statues of steel and magic. And at the far end, seated upon a throne of obsidian and iron, was the vampire king, Lucien Voss. Even from a distance, Elara felt him. Power radiated from him like heat from fire, controlled, contained, but devastating if unleashed. His pale hair fell past his shoulders, framing a face carved by centuries of rule and loss. His eyes, glowing red as embers, scanned the room with bored indifference. But it was his hand that made Elara stop breathing. Resting against the arm of the throne, glowing softly, was a mark. A crescent moon wrapped in a thorned rose. Elara knew that mark. She had seen it when her mother screamed in her sleep. She had seen it glow faintly on her mother's arm when nightmares came. She had traced it once with trembling fingers while Mara cried and begged her not to touch it. Elara didn't think. She stepped inside. No one noticed at first. Nobles were too busy boasting. Guards were too focused on threats worthy of their attention. A little girl in a servant's dress did not register as danger. Elara walked straight toward the throne. Each step made the pull stronger, warmer, like coming home. Lucien Voss felt it the moment she touched him. Small fingers brushed the blood moon seal on his palm. The chamber exploded with crimson light. Magic roared through the room, rattling chandeliers and shattering goblets. The marble floor cracked, glowing veins spreading outward like living blood. Conversations died instantly. Guards reached for weapons, then froze as ancient power pressed down on them. Lucien's head snapped downward. For the first time in centuries, shock pierced his control. The child stood before him, unafraid, her hand still resting against his glowing seal. Her dark eyes reflected the crimson light as she looked up at him with simple curiosity. "Sir," she said softly, her voice clear in the stunned silence, "my mom has a mark just like yours." The world stopped. Gasps rippled through the chamber. That mark was sacred. Singular. It belonged only to the ruling bloodline, one believed extinct. It could not be copied. Could not be shared. Could not exist on a mortal. Lucien rose slowly. "Child," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "repeat what you just said." Elara blinked. "My mom. It's on her arm. It glows when she's sad. Or when she has bad dreams." Whispers erupted, sharp and panicked. "That's impossible. The bloodline ended. A servant bearing the seal?" Lucien ignored them. He knelt. The vampire king, feared across realms, dropped to one knee before a maid's daughter. He gently turned Elara's palm upward. Beneath her skin, faint but unmistakable, the blood moon seal flickered to life, responding to his like a heartbeat answering another. Lucien's breath hitched. "Bring me her mother," he commanded. "Now." Far below, in the servant quarters, Mara Ashwin folded linens with trembling hands. When guards burst in, her heart stopped. "The king summons you." Fear flooded her instantly. "Elara," she whispered. "Where is my daughter?" The guards did not answer. She ran. When Mara entered the throne chamber, the sight broke her. Elara stood before the throne. The vampire king held her wrist. The entire court stared. "Mama?" Elara cried. Mara dropped to her knees. "Please, your majesty. She's just a child. If she did something—" Lucien turned toward her. And recognition shattered him. "I know you," he whispered. Mara shook her head, terror flooding her veins. "No, my lord. I'm just a maid." Lucien raised his hand. Pain tore through Mara's arm like fire. She screamed as fabric burned away, revealing the blood moon seal blazing crimson across her skin. The castle screamed with her. Memories surged. Flames. Betrayal. A crown falling. A voice shouting, "Erase her." Lucien caught her as she collapsed. "What did they do to you?" he demanded, fury cracking his immortal calm. The bloodline had returned. And the kingdom would never be the same. The throne hall did not calm after Mara Ashwin's scream. It fractured. Cries erupted from the nobles, some in terror, others in outrage. Goblets shattered against the marble floor as courtiers stumbled backward, desperate to distance themselves from what they had just witnessed. A servant, marked with the blood moon seal, was not merely impossible. It was heresy against the natural order of the vampire world. Mara collapsed to her knees, clutching her burning arm, breath coming in broken gasps. Elara struggled against Lucien's grip, crying out for her mother, panic finally breaking through her childlike calm. "Mama. Mama, it hurts, doesn't it?" Lucien released Elara instantly and knelt beside Mara, one hand hovering just above the glowing seal, afraid to touch it. "Easy," he murmured, his voice softer than anyone in the chamber had ever heard. "You're safe. I swear it." The words stunned the court. The vampire king did not swear anything, especially not to servants. High Lord Varric recovered first. "This is madness," he snapped, stepping forward. "Your Majesty, this woman is a danger. A servant bearing royal blood threatens the stability of the realm. You must order her confinement, immediately." Mara flinched. Years of conditioning screamed at her to bow, to apologize, to accept punishment she did not understand. She pulled Elara closer, shielding her instinctively. Lucien rose slowly. The temperature in the hall dropped. "A danger," Lucien repeated quietly. "Because she exists?" Varric's lips tightened. "Because bloodlines matter. Because order matters." Lucien's eyes burned brighter. "Order built on cruelty deserves collapse." A murmur rippled through the nobles, fearful, disbelieving. Lucien turned to the guards. "Clear the chamber." "What?" Varric protested. "This is a royal banquet." "Now." The command was absolute. One by one, nobles were escorted out, their protests echoing uselessly against ancient stone. Within minutes, only guards, healers, and the Ashwin family remained. Lucien crouched again beside Mara. "Can you stand?" She nodded weakly, though her legs trembled. Elara wrapped her arms around her mother's neck, whispering over and over, "It's okay, Mama. He won't let them hurt you." Lucien heard that too. He signaled the healer. "Take them to the eastern tower." The healer hesitated. "Your Majesty, that wing is reserved for those under my protection," Lucien finished. The walk through the castle felt unreal to Mara. Servants stopped and stared as guards escorted her, not roughly, not dismissively, but with respect. She kept waiting for punishment, for chains, for accusations. Instead, doors opened without touch. Candles flared brighter as she passed. The eastern tower chamber was warm and impossibly elegant. Velvet drapes. A fire crackling softly. A bed that looked too delicate to touch. Mara stood frozen. "I don't belong here," she whispered. Lucien dismissed the guards and healer before turning to her. "You belong wherever you stand." The words broke something inside her. She sank onto the bed, tears spilling freely now, years of humiliation pouring out all at once. Elara climbed into her lap, small arms tight around her waist. "I'm scared," Mara admitted. "I don't understand any of this." Lucien lowered himself into a chair across from her, posture controlled but eyes heavy with emotion. "They erased you," he said. "Your memories, Your identity. Someone feared what you represented. Mara shook her head. I've only ever been a maid. Lucien watched the seal pulse on her arm. You were never only that. That night Mara dreamed. She dreamed of fire-licking stone walls. Of a crown slipping from her hands. Of Lucien, younger, desperate, screaming her name as soldiers dragged her away. She woke screaming. Lucien was there instantly. He didn't touch her at first, only spoke softly, grounding her in the present. When she finally reached for him, trembling, he held her carefully as though she might shatter. Across the castle, resentment brewed. Servants whispered that one of their own now lived like royalty. Nobles sneered behind closed doors, calling it manipulation, trickery, weakness. The next morning Mara learned just how cruel the court could be. When she entered the dining hall, dressed still in servant gray, conversation stopped. A noblewoman laughed openly. So this is the queen now, she said. Smells like soap and laundry. Laughter followed. Mara froze, face burning. Before she could retreat, Lucien appeared at her side. Apologize, he said calmly. The noblewoman scoffed. To a maid. Lucien's gaze hardened. To the woman under my protection. The noblewoman fell to her knees, choking as invisible pressure crushed her lungs. Lucien released her only when she sobbed apologies. The message spread instantly. By nightfall, assassins moved through the lower halls. They never reached the tower. Lucien returned with blood on his sleeves and rage barely contained. They will not touch you again, he told Mara. For the first time in her life she believed it. And somewhere deep within Vos Castle, ancient magic stirred, recognizing its lost queen, and preparing for what came next. The dawn after the blood moon banquet felt unnatural. The castle itself seemed to hold its breath. Light streamed through stained glass, painting crimson and violet patterns across the polished marble floors, but even the sun couldn't warm Vos Castle that morning. The guards moved silently, their shadows stretching long across the halls. Even the servants whispered in hushed tones, eyes darting nervously toward the eastern tower, where Mara and Elara now stayed under Lucien's direct protection. Elara, still small and trembling from the events of the night before, refused to leave her mother's side. The blood moon seal glimmered faintly beneath her skin, responding to every heartbeat. Every breath Mara took seemed to echo inside Elara. And Elara, though only a child, felt the weight of centuries pressing against her tiny shoulders. Lucien did not sleep. He remained near the eastern tower, a silent sentinel. The king of Vos Castle, feared across realms, paced with measured steps, hands clasped behind his back, eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. His mind replayed the impossible over and over. A servant bearing the blood moon seal, a child who spoke truth without fear, a bloodline thought extinct. The whispers of his ancestors stirred through the hallways, warning, accusing, and yet, something else lingered, a possibility, fragile and terrifying. Elara climbed onto the window ledge, her small hands pressed to the cold glass. Outside, the castle gardens shimmered under the first light of day. Flowers, once wilting under the shadow of power, now leaned toward the girl as if recognizing something only she possessed. A low wind stirred, carrying with it faint echoes of whispers Elara could not understand, but somehow comprehended. She was not a normal child. She had always known that. "Mama," she whispered, drawing Mara closer, "do you feel it too?" Mara shook her head. I only feel fear. Confusion. How can this happen? How can we be here?" Elara's dark eyes narrowed. "It's happening because it has to. We can't hide anymore." Lucien entered silently, his presence causing both women to stiffen. His usual cold expression softened slightly as he observed them, not as servants, not as intruders, but as family. He knelt to Elara's level, letting her meet his gaze. "You understand more than you should," Lucien said. "Do you know what this means?" Elara nodded. "I know. I have to protect her. And you." Lucien's jaw tightened. Few had ever spoken to him in such certainty. Fewer still with the weight of truth behind their words. And yet, he sensed it, the small, indomitable flame of courage that burned brighter than any immortal power. That night, a shadow moved through the castle walls. Not a servant. Not a noble. A spy from the Iron Covenant, sent to verify rumors, had infiltrated Vos Castle. He moved like a ghost, silent and precise, until he reached the eastern tower. He paused, listening. The soft hum of magic emanated from within, pulsing like a heartbeat. He dared not enter further. He had heard stories of the king's wrath, but this was something else entirely. Elara sensed him. She stood on the balcony, the wind tossing her hair. "He's here," she whispered to Mara. Mara's hands shook. "Lucien. Someone." Before she could finish, Lucien appeared behind them, already aware. His presence was sudden, overwhelming, his red eyes flaring. The spy froze, realizing the mortal rules he had relied upon meant nothing here. Lucien's hand shot out, gripping the man by the throat with effortless strength, lifting him off the balcony. "You dared to touch what you do not understand," Lucien's voice cut through the night. "Do you know the cost of failure?" The spy stammered. Your Majesty, I only—" "You will leave," Lucien said. "And you will never return. And if you do," his gaze flicked to Mara and Elara, "you will answer to them." The man vanished into the night, leaving nothing but the faint whisper of fear behind. Elara's small hand brushed Lucien's arm. "Did I do that?" He knelt beside her, letting her see the seriousness in his expression. "No," he said quietly. "You felt it. You warned me. That is why we survived." That night, in the quiet of the Eastern Tower, Mara finally dared to ask the question that had haunted her since the banquet. "Why us? Why now?" Lucien's expression was unreadable. "Because the bloodline remembers itself. Because someone tried to erase what should never have been forgotten. And because you, Mara Ashwin, carried the impossible within you." Mara shivered. "I'm a maid. I'm nothing." "Nothing?" Lucien's eyes flared with sudden intensity. "You carried the seal without knowing it. You endured humiliation without losing yourself. You protected your child without fear. That is everything. That is more than this kingdom has seen in centuries." Elara climbed into Mara's lap, listening to the conversation with eyes wide as if she were piecing together the vast, impossible puzzle of her existence. And then, as if the castle itself had been waiting for this moment, a strange vibration filled the walls. Not violent, but deliberate. The blood moon seal on Mara's arm pulsed in perfect rhythm with the seal on Lucien's palm, sending ripples of light across the stone floor. The magic was ancient, older than Vos Castle, older than the kings whose portraits lined the walls. Lucien rose, his face pale under the firelight, his voice a whisper that carried far beyond the tower. "It has begun. The awakening, and it will not stop." Outside the tower, the first signs of challenge appeared. Nobles who had resisted Mara's rise began to gather in secret, whispering of betrayal, of fear, of the woman who dared touch the king. Spies spread rumors. Allies tested loyalty. And somewhere across the dark forests of the realm, rival vampires prepared to strike. Elara, sitting on the window ledge, looked toward the horizon. "They don't know we're ready," she said. Lucien placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "We are always ready," he said. "But we do not strike first. We endure. We wait. And when the moment comes—" His gaze shifted to Mara. "We protect what belongs to us." Mara felt the warmth of that promise, stronger than any magic, stronger than any crown. For the first time in her life she felt, not powerless, not forgotten, not a servant, but part of something eternal, something unstoppable, something worth fighting for. And in that moment, Elara understood fully. She was no longer just a child wandering the halls of Vos Castle. She was the spark. She was the bridge between past and future. She was the reason the blood moon seal had returned. The kingdom beyond the walls did not yet know it, but the age of the Ashwins, and the return of the true bloodline, was about to begin. The days after the blood moon awakening brought a tense, uneasy calm to Vos Castle. The corridors were quieter, almost painfully so, as if the stones themselves were holding their breath. Nobles whispered in corners, their silk dresses rustling against the shadows, while guards cast sharp, wary glances at every face that passed. Rumors spread like wildfire. A maid had awakened the blood moon seal, the bloodline was alive, and the king, Lucien Voss, was no longer the distant, untouchable figure they had feared for centuries. For Mara Ashwin, the reality of her life had shifted in ways she could barely comprehend. No longer merely a servant, no longer just a mother trying to survive, she now carried power she didn't fully understand. The blood moon seal burned faintly along her arm, pulsing in time with her heartbeat, as if reminding her constantly of the life that had been hidden, erased, and then returned. She could feel it during the night, glowing when she slept, tugging her toward memories long buried. Elara, small but fierce, took to exploring the castle even more boldly now. She had learned how to navigate the guards' patrols without detection and had begun to sense magic in the air, subtle vibrations that others missed. Her childlike curiosity was sharper than any blade. She could feel danger before it struck, detect lies in whispers, and even sensed faint tremors of emotion from nobles who tried to mask their fear. She had become a beacon for those who had always been unseen, a protector for the very family she had helped awaken. One afternoon, Mara found herself in the kitchens, trying to maintain some semblance of normality. Even as the castle whispered with unease, she was determined not to let her child grow up in fear. Yet every clatter of a pan, every whisper behind a door, seemed magnified. Her arm burned faintly, and she could feel the weight of the magic within her. "Elara," she called softly, knowing the child was never far. From above, a small voice called back, "I'm here, Mama. Don't worry." When Elara appeared at the balcony, her eyes dark and wide, she was holding a small, trembling kitten she had found hiding in the pantry. "It's scared," she said. "We have to help it." Mara smiled faintly. "That's like you. Always seeing the ones others forget." Before they could speak further, a chilling presence descended in the hall. The room grew cold, shadows stretching unnaturally long. Mara turned to see Lucien standing in the doorway, his crimson eyes piercing through the warm light of the kitchen. He moved without sound, a predator among mortals, yet his gaze softened when it landed on Mara and Elara. "There is unrest," he said simply. "Outside these walls, the nobles and exiled factions are gathering. They have heard of the seal and will not wait long before acting. You must be ready." Mara's stomach twisted. "Acting? What can they do? We're protected by you." Lucien's expression darkened. "They will try regardless. Those who have lost power do not surrender easily. And now that the bloodline is alive, even the smallest threat could become lethal." Elara's small voice broke the silence. "Then we will be ready. We can help." Lucien's eyes softened again, but a flicker of concern passed through them. "You are a child, Elara. This is not your fight." "But it is my fight," she insisted. "You saved Mama. You saved me. Now we save them too." Lucien studied her, the weight of centuries pressing on his shoulders. He had never been one to allow a mortal to intervene in matters of life and death, but the courage in Elara's eyes was undeniable. Slowly he knelt beside her. "Then we learned together. And we survived together. Do you understand?" Elara nodded, determination shining in her eyes. That evening, the castle bristled with tension. Lucien had called a private council, summoning only those loyal to him, the few remaining nobles and the trusted guards who had never wavered in their service. The council convened in the inner hall, where the air seemed to hum with power. Mara stood behind Elara, holding her daughter close. Neither had been allowed in such a room before, yet tonight they were not visitors, they were the reason the kingdom had survived. High Lord Varric was the first to speak, voice tight with barely concealed fear. "Majesty, the exiled factions are moving. They will attack the outer walls within 3 nights. We must prepare the defenses immediately. If the bloodline—" Lucien's hand cut him off, rising like a blade. "No," he said quietly, but every word carried deadly weight. "We prepare, yes. But we do not strike first. Those who come will see the consequences of challenging us, but the first blow must never be ours." Varric opened his mouth to argue but closed it, understanding the power in Lucien's calm. Even centuries of arrogance could not withstand the weight of a king who had witnessed bloodlines erased and returned. The council moved into action. Guards sharpened weapons, enchanted wards were placed along corridors, and the castle's defensive runes pulsed faintly with anticipation. Mara observed quietly, learning the rituals and procedures, realizing that she too could influence this realm if she dared. Late at night, after the council had disbanded, Lucien found Mara and Elara in the castle gardens. The moonlight bathed the garden in silver and crimson, illuminating flowers that seemed to lean toward them as if aware of their power. Lucien's gaze lingered on Mara. "You will need training," he said. "The seal is not just a mark. It is a weapon, a beacon, and a responsibility. And the longer you resist, the more dangerous it becomes." Mara nodded, swallowing her fear. I am ready to learn." Elara jumped into his side, eyes bright. "We'll learn together, right?" Lucien's lips quirked into the faintest smile. "Together," he agreed, though the red in his eyes burned brighter, a warning to any who might threaten them. And then the whispers began. From the dark forests beyond the castle walls, shadows moved. Assassins and spies, both mortal and immortal, had heard of the return of the bloodline. They came not just to kill, but to understand the impossibility they were witnessing. And in the quiet corridors of Vos Castle, the seals pulsed, sensing the danger, preparing for the inevitable clash that would test loyalty, courage, and the very heart of the kingdom. Elara, perched on the balcony above, touched her mother's arm, feeling the magic thrum in sync with hers. "They don't know what they're waking," she said softly. Lucien's hand rested on her shoulder. "No," he said. "They have no idea what power truly means, until it chooses to reveal itself." And for the first time Mara felt the truth. Survival in Vos Castle was no longer about obedience. It was about courage. It was about love. And it was about standing against a world that had always tried to erase her. Night fell across Vos Castle like a velvet shroud, the air thick with tension and the faint hum of ancient magic. Outside the castle walls, shadows moved through the forest, subtle at first, like whispers carried by the wind, but growing more deliberate with each passing hour. Mara Ashwin, though still dressed in simple gray, walked through the eastern tower corridor with newfound confidence. The glow of the blood moon seal along her arm pulsed gently, a reminder of the power that now resided within her, and of the responsibilities that came with it. Elara trailed behind her mother, clutching her hand tightly. Even at her small age she sensed the brewing danger. "Mama, I can feel them," she whispered, voice trembling, though her eyes were fierce. "They're coming closer." Mara paused and pressed a finger to her lips. "Shoo, we have Lucien." That name, spoken softly, seemed to reassure both of them. Lucien Voss, the vampire king, had become more than a guardian. To Mara he was a force of nature, both terrifying and protective. To Elara he was a living shield, a promise that no harm would reach her mother or herself. And yet, beneath his commanding presence, Mara sensed something else. A deep, unspoken longing in his crimson eyes whenever they met hers, something that stirred her heart in ways she had never imagined. The castle bells tolled midnight. Lucien appeared as if summoned by thought alone, descending the stairs from the throne room with a predatory grace that left shadows trembling in his wake. Mara's heart skipped, a strange flutter in her chest she could not name. "They will strike tonight," Lucien said, his voice low, almost a growl that vibrated through the corridor. "The exiled factions have sent assassins to test the castle's defenses. And some will seek you, Mara." Mara's breath caught. "Me?" "Yes. They know the seal exists. They do not know its full power, but they will attempt to claim or destroy it. You and Elara are the catalysts. They cannot leave you alive if they hope to challenge the Bloodline's return." Elara's small hand gripped her mother's. "Then we fight," she said, determination blazing. "I'll help." Lucien's gaze softened, though the red in his eyes remained bright. "You are brave," he murmured almost to himself. "But bravery alone will not save you. You must learn to control it." The first attack came just as the moon rose to its apex. Shadows slipped through the outer walls of the castle like living darkness, moving with unnatural speed. Mara and Elara were led to the defensive chambers, where Lucien and his elite guards had stationed themselves strategically. Spells etched into the floor flared faintly, illuminating the room with a silver glow that danced across their faces. Mara felt the seal pulse violently, a warning of imminent danger. She could feel the life force of those approaching, weak, desperate, and reckless. Elara, sensing the same vibrations, closed her eyes and whispered words in the ancient tongue she had begun to learn from her mother. The syllables were foreign, melodic, and carried weight. Lucien watched her silently, eyes narrowing. He did not intervene. He did not need to. The child's small hands moved with precision, weaving subtle magic that forced the shadows to hesitate, falter, and then recoil. For the first time, Mara realized that Elara's gift was more than instinct. It was ancient power awakening, something that even she did not fully comprehend. The battle began. Assassins lunged, but they were met with overwhelming force. Lucien moved like a phantom, his black cloak whipping through the air, crimson eyes flashing with lethal intent. Each strike was precise, calculated, devastating. Guards fell in and out of shadows, repelling attackers with sword and spell. The hallways rang with the clash of steel and the low hum of unleashed magic. Through it all, Mara felt a strange sense of clarity. She was no longer the powerless maid. She could sense the flow of energy, the rhythm of battle, the presence of life and death intertwined. Every time Lucien's gaze swept past her, there was a flicker, something unspoken, yet undeniably present. She felt it too, a deep, burning connection that went beyond gratitude or fear. At the height of the attack, Elara was cornered. 3 figures advanced, cloaked in black, their faces hidden. The seal on her arm flared, and for a moment she froze. Then, with sudden clarity, she extended her hands, the words of the ancient language flowing freely. A wave of light erupted, pushing the attackers back. Lucien was at her side in an instant. He placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her. "Steady. Focus. Use the power but do not let it consume you. Elara obeyed. Her small voice carried authority that belied her years, bending the shadows to her will, forcing the intruders to flee into the night. The battle ended as suddenly as it began. The castle was scarred but intact. Guards tended to minor injuries, while Lucien led Mara and Elara back to the eastern tower. The seal on their arms still pulsed, echoing in perfect rhythm. Mara's hands shook as she clutched Elara. I didn't think I could do it, she whispered. You did, Lucien said, voice low, almost a growl of approval. You both did. And you will do more. The world outside this castle does not yet understand the power that has returned. And then, in the quiet aftermath, Lucien lingered. The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting the sharp angles, the centuries of wear etched into his skin, and the crimson glow in his eyes. He knelt before Mara not as a king but as a man confronting his own desires. You are not just the mother of the child who carries the seal, he said, voice soft, intimate. You are part of the reason the line survives. And part of the reason I cannot ignore what I feel for you. Mara's breath caught. The words, unexpected, raw, and dangerous, ignited a fire in her chest. She had always feared this man, feared his power, his judgment, his wrath, but now she felt the pull of something different. Something tender. Something terrifyingly human. Lucien's hand hovered over hers, a question unspoken, an invitation that was as dangerous as the battles they had just fought. Mara's fingers trembled. She met his gaze, the weight of centuries and centuries of bloodlines, battles, and betrayal pressing against them both. Elara, sensing the tension, tugged at her mother's hand. Mama, are you okay? Mara smiled softly, forcing herself back into the moment. Yes, my love. We are okay, for now. Outside, the shadows receded, but the threat remained. The world had seen a glimpse of the impossible. A maid and her daughter standing against centuries of fear and hatred, defended by the most powerful vampire in existence. And inside Vos Castle, a different kind of storm was rising. A slow-burning, undeniable connection between Mara and Lucien, forged in blood, trust, and the shared weight of destiny. The castle lay in an eerie silence as dawn approached, the first pale light filtering through the stained glass windows of Vos Castle. The air was thick, almost alive with tension. It had been weeks since the night of the first attack. Mara Ashwin had spent them learning, training, and understanding the power that coursed through her veins. Every pulse of the blood moon seal reminded her of the impossible truth. She was no longer a maid, no longer powerless. She was the living link to a bloodline that centuries of hatred and fear had tried to erase. Elara perched by the balcony, gazing at the horizon. The child's eyes, though young, were already sharper than many adults in the court. She had become Mara's shadow, a guardian in her own right, and a force that even Lucien could not entirely control. Mama, Elara whispered, I feel them. More than before. They're coming for us, all of us. Mara's hand rested over her daughter's small shoulder. Then we will be ready. Together. Lucien appeared silently behind them, his cloak brushing against the stone floor like a living shadow. His crimson eyes scanned the horizon, the seal on his palm pulsing faintly in resonance with Mara's and Elara's. The exiled factions, he murmured. They have gathered their full strength. But this time, it will not be enough. He turned his gaze to Mara. Are you prepared for what must happen tonight? Not just to defend this castle, but to reclaim what is ours. Mara swallowed hard. She felt fear, yes, but beneath it an undeniable fire. I am ready, she said firmly. Whatever it takes. Lucien studied her for a long moment, the centuries of his existence pressing into his expression. And then, almost imperceptibly, a flicker of warmth passed over his features, the first humanizing softness she had ever seen in the Vampire King. Good, he said quietly. Because this night will define everything. The first wave of attackers arrived as the moon climbed high in the sky, casting long silver shadows across the courtyard. The exiled vampires had amassed a force unlike any Vos Castle had seen in generations. Skilled killers, mercenaries, rogue sorcerers, all moving with precision and deadly intent. Mara stood at the forefront with Elara beside her. She could feel the seal throbbing, its power aligning with her heartbeat. The ground beneath them hummed with energy, responding to the bloodline that had returned. She took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of centuries of her ancestors in her veins. Lucien moved like a shadow beside her, every movement predatory, every gaze deadly. Yet, in the brief moments their eyes met, there was an unspoken bond, a recognition of shared destiny, a softening of the walls each had built over centuries of solitude. The battle erupted. Shadows collided with light. Spells clashed in the air, sending sparks of crimson and silver that painted the castle walls. Mara extended her hands, the ancient language flowing from her lips, shaping magic that forced the attackers backward. Elara, small but unrelenting, joined her, weaving the threads of the spell with astonishing precision. Together, mother and daughter became a single force, unstoppable and terrifying. Lucien's presence was the fulcrum of power. He moved with lethal grace, cutting through enemy ranks, his red eyes flaring as he unleashed centuries of combat experience. And yet, he never took Mara for granted. Every strike he made was measured to protect her, to ensure that the bloodline survived. Amidst the chaos, Mara's memories began to stir, the fragments of life erased from her childhood. She saw flashes, a young Lucien desperate, searching for a daughter lost to time, a mother hiding, fleeing from assassins who had tried to erase her existence, a castle burning with betrayal and blood. With each memory her resolve strengthened. The seal on her arm flared brighter, its crimson light merging with the glow from Lucien's palm and Elara's small hands. A wave of power surged outward, knocking attackers off their feet, shattering weapons and bending the battlefield to their will. And then it happened. The leader of the exiles stepped forward, a vampire cloaked in black, his presence radiating authority and malevolence. "So," he sneered, "the lost bloodline dares to awaken. You are nothing but mortals playing with forces beyond your comprehension." Lucien stepped forward, eyes burning crimson. "We are everything. And you will witness it." The exiled leader lunged. Mara and Elara, in perfect synchrony, unleashed their magic. Light erupted in a dazzling explosion that illuminated the night, throwing shadows across the forest and walls of the castle. The leader was thrown back, defeated but alive, forced to retreat in fear. For the first time in centuries, Vos Castle stood unchallenged. The bloodline had returned. The impossible had happened. And the people within the castle, Mara, Elara, Lucien, had proven their power and their right to exist. After the battle, the castle was quiet. Mara and Elara stood on the balcony, watching the horizon. Lucien joined them, his hand brushing hers. No words were needed. The bond forged in battle and trust spoke louder than anything. "Mara," Lucien whispered, voice low, almost intimate, "you have survived the impossible. You have endured. And through it all, you have become more than I ever imagined." Mara met his gaze, feeling her heart beat faster than it had in years. I couldn't have done it without you. Without you protecting us." "You protect us as well," he said, his thumb brushing lightly against her hand, sending shivers down her spine. "You saved my bloodline. You saved my legacy. And you saved me." Elara giggled softly, sensing the quiet moment between them. "Mama," she whispered, "he likes you." Mara laughed softly, the tension of months melting away in a rare, joyful sound. Even Lucien allowed a faint smile, one that was human in its warmth. The days that followed were filled with rebuilding, reconciliation, and recognition. Nobles who had whispered against Mara now bowed in respect, guards and servants whispered her name with reverence, and the castle itself seemed to hum with life. Mara finally understood her place, not as a maid, not as a powerless human, but as the link between past and future, mother and daughter, mortal and immortal. And in Lucien she found not only protection but a kindred soul, a love that had grown slowly, nurtured by shared struggle, trust, and quiet understanding. One evening, as the sun set behind the scarlet crown chamber, Lucien and Mara stood together. The seal on their arms pulsed in harmony, a silent testament to the bond that now existed between them. He took her hand in his, crimson eyes softening. "You will be my queen," he said quietly, the words carrying centuries of meaning and promise. Mara's breath caught. "And you, my king," she whispered. Elara, perched on the balcony railing, watched them with wide eyes. "It's perfect," she said. The castle echoed with the magic of the bloodline, the love of a mother, a daughter, and a king, and the knowledge that the impossible had become reality. The blood moon seal had returned, the Ashwin legacy had awakened, and Vos Castle would never again be a place of shadows and fear.